why am I going to build new property? There's a cap on what I can charge for. And hence you have reduced supply and you have all the problems we have in cities now. You have other problems too with zoning and other building regulations. Don't get me wrong, but you mess with price, you slaughter the market. People want to believe it works. People want to think that somehow now everybody who can afford it can get it. We're going to put a price control so now the poor can get it. And the truth is that the affluent family with a large SUV just bought 30 cases of water. And the poor person who took the bus got there too late. That's a shortage. Welcome to the Academy on Capitalism. Today, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, regulation. Actually, I'm kidding. It's not everybody's favorite topic, but it's an important one. And we are going to talk about it today. I want to first welcome you to our web channel. Please be sure to check out our other videos. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and leave a comment. And we'll get back to you. So back to regulation. Yes. So here's the thing. If I start right now and I say, yay, regulation or boo, regulation, half of you are going to turn it off. So what I want to do is instead talk about regulation and talk about considerations when we're thinking about regulations. So perhaps we get a better handle on maybe what are good regulations and bad regulations. And for those of you who are anarchists in our program, I'll come back to you at the very end. We'll give down in the notes where that comes in. Okay. So I'm not ignoring you, but even were there no government, these are still considerations we have to think about with regulations. So with no more regulatory ado, we shall begin. So now here's the first thing. And every time I start a discussion anymore, it's like, what are your terms, right? What do you mean by regulation? Because if I'm thinking one thing and you're thinking another thing, we're we're just talking past each other, and that's no good. That doesn't get us anywhere. And the Academy is all about education. So I'm going to define a regulation broadly. And what we're going to call regulation in this video is anything that's outside of the trade that dictates terms or conditions about the trade or actually forbids the trade. So it is, in the simplest case, we have two parties. They're trying to voluntarily agree to something, but now there's this outside entity, and most of the time that'll be government, that dictates maybe terms on that trade or down and out prohibits that trade. Okay. So that's going to be our starting place. Okay. And what I want to do is, as I said, talk a little bit more about how we might judge these things. But the first thing I want to point out, my degree's in philosophy. I love John Stuart Mill, right? The harm principle. If you're familiar with the harm principle, great. If you're not, go read some John Stuart Mill. Go read On Liberty. You could do worse for your reading. And he talks about you should be able to do anything you want as long as you don't harm others. What he's looking for and what other philosophers and political theorists look for is this sort of magic bullet, the magic dividing line. Once we define that dividing line, everything on one side, good, everything on the other side, boo, hiss, bad. Yeah, it's a misguided project. I'll take the Pepsi challenge on that. And I'll give you an analogy why. Virus protection on your computer. You would think because your computer has useful programs on it and has an operating system, and we all know, well, we don't all know, but the programmers know what all of that is, that you'd be able to come up with one program to identify any sort of outside invaders that are going to mess with your computer, operating system, whatever, virus. You would think that would make sense. There's not, and there can't be. And this is why virus programs are always updated. The best that can be done is identify a new program that is a virus and then put it in the list that you look for. Okay. And so, that's how you sort of accumulate. It's almost like wisdom, right? You make your mistakes, you log it, you don't make that mistake again. So coming back to regulation, we're not taking in this particular video the position that we could come up with one ideal rule that would then determine good regulations and bad regulations. The best we can do, I think, and I put forward, is to discuss the nature of the interference in the trade, or the nature of the interaction between that outside party and the trade. Well, you'll see what I mean here in a second. Okay. So regulation is anything outside of these two people, right? Whatever they're voluntarily agreeing to, anything outside of them that impinges, impedes, infiltrates, whatever word you want to use, we're going to call that a regulation. One distinction I don't think people think about is that there are marketing enabling regulations and marketing disabling regulations. Let me say that again. There are regulations that actually enable markets to function, enable, I think, voluntary trade to work even. And there are those that disable it. Now, it's going to be a spectrum. It's not an all or nothing. Okay. Everything has its costs and benefits. So there's no, there's no one thing in this list that's all like, yay. There might be some things that are all boo we'll get to, but we have to realize that it's the real world. There's upsides and downsides. What we're looking for is more upside than downside. Okay. So what do I mean by market enabling regulations? Probably safe to say you haven't heard of that term. That's because I made it up. So that's why you haven't heard of it. Here's what I mean. Markets depend on property and contract, right? That's pretty solid. Whether you're left, right, libertarian, whatever. I mean, we know what markets rely on, whether we want to build them up or destroy them. Property rights and contract. When you trade, do your voluntary trade thing, you're trading the good that you have or service, but you're also trading some sort of property right in that good or service. You're giving the other person a certain property right ticket that now they hold. Okay. And they hold that in conjunction with whatever they bought. Okay. Now, property can take a wide range of forms. You have renting and leasing and outright ownership, but we have to recognize that property is key to trading. When I go to the store and I buy something, I don't just get the object, I get the right to that object. That's what the transaction gives me. I'm buying that right. If I just walk out of the store with the good, I still have the good, but now I'm stealing because I didn't buy that. If I buy a stolen good and it's found out that it's stolen and the police come and retrieve it, they have every right to, because the person who sold me the stolen good didn't have the one thing that I really needed to buy. And they couldn't sell the property right because they didn't have it. They stole the good in the first place. We buy and sell goods and services attached to property rights. That's going to make the whole thing right. What are property rights? Now, we can read some great philosophers. We can read John Locke, talk about life, liberty, and property. Heck, you can go to the Bible, right? Thou shalt not steal. Read Ayn Rand, right? Talk about the importance of ownership and property. But here's the thing with those kind of works, theoretical, whether it's philosophy, religious, even political science, they really start at like the 30,000 foot level. And if you read them carefully, and David Hume, a philosopher, points this out, so this isn't original to me, but if you look at it, what people really justify is that we have a right to property, but what that specific right is, that's going to vary. I mean, that's up for us to decide. There's no theory that tells you every single bit about what you're entitled to and what you're not entitled to. We kind of worked that out. And I do admit kind of upfront here, we're about 10 minutes in, but I do take a sort of common law view towards property in this video, okay? But we have to determine what those property rights are, because whatever they are, they get enforced, okay? What my rights aren't something, I can sell my right to something, but the definition of what I'm selling is beyond me. It's actually beyond the two parties even. It's like language. We can talk. I can tell you that my definition of regulation is a little different. a little broader. But you'll notice in the whole transaction here, if you listening and me speaking, you rely on the English language, and that's relying on the past actions of millions of speakers determining the meaning of the words that I'm using. I'm not determining the meaning of what's coming out of my mouth, right? These words. That's outside of our transaction. Okay. That's the baseline for communication. If I ignore that, then it's like gobbledygook, gorpy, vorpy, gorky, right? It's just nonsense. Sorry, that wasn't really good nonsense, but that's the best I could come up with at the time. But right, it's just not, and the same with trades. Property is going to be one of these things that's kind of bedrock. What a right is, what your property right actually is, isn't going to be up to the people in the trade. It's something that the people in the trade have to rely on because, like I said, when one person's buying, they're buying the property right. So we got to know what that is. And that's kind of not just between us. All right. So regulations, and they are regulations on individual conduct that establish property rights in their many and different and varied forms, whether those come from the courts or the legislature, right, the local magistrate, whatever. Those are regulations. Those are outside of the two parties, but it enables markets. And if you don't think so, you can look at places where there aren't secure property rights. If you go to the corruption indexes, you can find countries that are where corruption is rampant. And one of the things that's going to mean is that property rights just aren't respected whatsoever. You hold your property at the whim of somebody else that you have to pay off. Okay. And by the way, if you go and look at the Freedom Index by the Fraser Institute, those corrupt countries really match the ones that are most economically unfree and also then doing economically worse. Why are they economically unfree? Well, if you can't make a transaction in the first place, I don't even know how you have economics. Or say, well, Bill, they are making transactions. That's true. Black markets flourish throughout the world. Why don't you shop in more? Because your property rights aren't secure. You have no recourse whatsoever if somebody rips you off. You don't even have the means, and I'll get into this, to find out reputation or anything like that. So, yeah, people will trade because they have to. People will eat all sorts of things to survive. But that doesn't make it a good example, right, of what's good food or nutritious food. Same here. People will trade all over the place, but that's not to tell us what makes actually for a well-functioning market. Just people trading. So property rights enable trade and flourishing. The same with contract rights. Okay, same thing. People don't think about this, but elements of a contract. What counts as a signature? Now you could say that should just be up to the two parties to decide. Maybe if there's a dispute in the contract and now they have to take it to a third party, the third party has to be able to actually recognize that the contract was valid, that it was signed in the appropriate way. So once again, we need a regulation, something that regulates conduct and interaction between people that has origins and meaning outside of those two people, like language, so that now others can recognize it. Right? Being able to publicly recognize it's key here. Because if people can't recognize that as a signature, if people don't recognize that as a legal and binding signature, then the contract's worth nothing. So there are things outside of the transaction then that stipulate what counts and what doesn't count. That's marketing, that's market enablement. And there's a lot of those kind of rules running around. Okay. There are a lot of those kind of rules running around. So that's market enabling. I will get a little bit more, let us say, contentious. So another thing, if you look at like the common law, you have bailments. That is, if you give your package to somebody to deliver, part of the deal is getting your package there safely. You can't separate that out of the deal. They can't say, okay, give me your money and sign this waiver that in case we jump up and down and crush this thing and get it there in pieces over several days, you can't sue it. No, sorry, it's part of the deal. That's actually the good or service that they're selling. It's implied in the contract, and that's beyond the ability of the parties to agree with. The same with safety and travel, because let's face it, we are human packages. And when we get on planes, trains, and other various forms of transport, we're not just buying a ticket to get our body from point A to point B. We're getting our body there safely, uh, preferably uninjured at all. Definitely want to get there alive. And if through the negligence of those carrying us, that does not happen, then we have recourse. What the company, whether it's airlines, railroads, whatever, cannot do, right? It's not even recognized as counting as a contract. What they can't do is say, we're going to sell you your ticket. By the way, sign this release form so that in case, our pilots fall asleep at the wheel from doing too much coke the night before and it crashes, you can't sue us. No, it's a no-go. That's just not a valid contract. So what even counts as a valid contract is determined outside of the parties. I realize if there are people out there who are fans of Murray Rothbard that they're going to take deep issue with it, and that's fine. Let's acknowledge that there is an argument. But on this side of the argument, or where I'm coming at, that makes sense. It makes sense that you don't try to peel off certain aspects of a good or service that really are inherent in the good or service, right? I'm selling water. I shouldn't have to, here, I'm going to sell you water, but here's a waiver that there's not poison in the water. What? Right? Or you drink and slake your thirst, but then there's poison and you'll die. That's the dumbest thing ever. Nobody buys water to drink poison. Right. Nobody buys an airplane ticket to crash or a train ticket to get in an accident. That's just not part of the deal. And anybody who's trying to separate those out, choose another carrier, right? So I wanted to point that out. Bailments and other things like that determine what is a legitimate and illegitimate contract. That's a regulation. And it makes for efficient markets. Okay. It makes for things that people do not have to worry about. Transaction costs that people don't have to encounter or deal with, right? Because if now I have to decide if I'm riding on a plane, if I want to buy the added safety plane ticket, well, now I got to go research what the crash rate is. I got to go research what the value of that sort of thing is. I got to look, right? That's a lot of time wasted on my part, the consumer's part. And that's who we're talking about, right? The consumer. To invest in that. They don't have to invest in that. And you know what? I've never heard a business gripe about it, but it saves them time too, because it's just not even an option to pursue. Just whatever your business strategy is, it can't be that. Let's save the time on that. Go invest your time into something that'll give you real returns. Okay. So it does make, knowing what your property is, got to get my hand in the frame here, knowing what your property right is and knowing what counts as a contract, whether it's signatures or what you're able to include or not include, that's the foundations of the market. And it's determined outside of the people making the deal. It's a regulation, right? It enables it. Even more contentiously, if we're going to think about regulation, right? Informational regulations. Now, here's one, right? So if you think the importance, the moral foundation of trade is that it's two people, that they are rational adults, considering the information that they have or all the information available, and therefore trying to make the best decisions possible for them or the rational decisions possible for them, right? And people ought to respect those choices because I have rights, I'm an adult, whatever the case may be. Okay, at the foundation of this whole thing is not just the voluntary choice that I'm handing over money to you or whatever else, but at the foundation of this is that before I do that, I have to use my brain. And it's my brain and my choice, right? And it has to be mine, because if there's a gun to my head, then we don't count it. Okay, that's not what we're talking here. So it's my brain, my choice, and once I enact that choice in the world, you have to respect it, but you have to respect it because it started here. Well, guess what? I need information to do that. Okay. Now I know there are some hardcore people who are going like caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. I get that. And surely that's an argument out there. But once again, it bogs down market transactions. So if somebody's selling a car and now I have to inspect the entire car before I can buy it. And even then, maybe there's something hidden I didn't find. And now that's on me. That seems to decrease trust in the market, I would say. And trust in market transactions is really important. I have to trust that, when I give you my money, I'm not getting an empty candy bar wrapper, just a box. The whole thing functions on a certain level of trust. So there are regulations that require you to disclose material defects in something that you're selling. Could be a house, could be a car. Those strike me in this argument as market enabled. Those are things that allow us to not invest a lot of wasted time because there might be a few individuals out there trying to sell us a car without some piece that I could never guess. And even if I took it to a garage to inspect, why would you normally look at something like that, right? And then within 2 days, the car quits running, explodes, or whatever. That seems like we're back in the world of black markets. So disclosing material defects. Now, I'm not saying that one can't be abused. What counts as a material defect? Exactly what has to be disclosed, how we're going to prove disclosure. In an ideal world, those would be kept to a minimum and be efficient. But in a world where if if some outside agency, the agency of material defects and the government's in charge of it, well, whatever we have today is not enough tomorrow because whoever the next head of that department is, whoever, the next whatever is, they have to do more. They have to show their worth. They have to prove themselves. So we have to make this better by making it more and more onerous. And I get that. And so then you end up with anybody buy a pillow recently? Seriously, a pillow or a decorative pillow. And there are just like reams of paper. I could feed my printer with this, right? It looks like a kite almost with just all this paper coming off that nobody reads and nobody cares about. And that's because of this process. And I acknowledge that happens. So, and then you try to rip the tags off and then it rips the seam. Then you got to cut the tags off. And then it still leaves a little hard part. Now, if you're lying on the wrong side of the pillow, it's like, damn it. And you have to say, it's ridiculous. We all know that. Mattress tags. I get that. I want, if it's flammable, disclosed. I want if, there's something, I really have to take note of, warning, this mattress might explode if it gets over 90 degrees. Yeah, I want that kind of stuff. But any other than that, the other regulation on this too, and I'm going to go into right. The other one is California's regulation, right? That anything that has like cancer causing agents in it, everything now has to carry the warning. This product has X, Y, and Z in it. They've been shown to cause cancer. Cause cancer if you eat them or rub them into your skin or inhale them. But I just bought a lamp. I'm not going to chew on my lamp. I'm not going to eat my lamp. I'm not going to gently massage myself with this new lamp, right? And even if I am holding it, the chemicals and bits are all locked together in the plastic, metal, and everything else, right? I have no reason to believe that they're going to leach out. So there really is no risk of harm. And yet California regulations demands that they disclose anything with cancer-causing properties. So I get that, if I'm eating something and it raises the risk of cancer, maybe I want to see that. But this takes on sort of a religious, and that's what happens with regulations, right? They take on a sort of almost religious connotation. Cancer-causing agents are bad, therefore everything. It's like, there's room to be wise in there and not ridiculous. And that goes to the, labeling. regulations. And on this one, I'm kind of an outlier. I'm kind of a libertarian kind of guy, but um, if people want to buy food and make wise decisions or unwise decisions, uh, they should be able to see what's in the product. And I'm sorry, no amount of research that I'm going to do, right? If Kraft, because I love mac and cheese. I know I shouldn't. Doc says I shouldn't. I love mac and cheese. I could drive to Kraft tomorrow, right? Knock on the door, maybe get to whoever's in charge out front, whatever assistant, and be like, I want some mac and cheese today. Could you tell me how many calories are in that? How much salt and saturated fat? And they'll just be like, I would probably guarantee that everybody in the plant would look at you like that. I mean, it's information that you really, unless the company publishes, you're not going to get flat out, period. And once again, remember, if you think that the reason, voluntary, and choice is a moral foundation, and you do too. And so I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're free market or not, but you think about personal relationships. It's not just theft we're talking about, personal relationships. Whether I decide to get romantic and intimate with somebody, it better be me deciding that, and it better be them deciding that, deliberating over it, and be my own decision, not manipulated, not violated, because that's assault. So bedrock voluntary agreement relies on it being the individual's own brain. I know I was pointing at my eyebrow there, but somewhere back there is my brain. And I can't do that unless I have the information. So I would put forward that actually dietary nutrition stuff is actually market enabling. It facilitates voluntary trade precisely because it enables better decision making. It enables deliberation in the first place and not just guesswork. Once again, can go too far because once those things are published, then the next impetus is, oh my God, that has 30% saturated fat. We need a warning label now. And then it begins, right? We need basically what happens is we need a judgment label. Oh, look at that high salt content. We need a judgment label. No, I just need the information that I couldn't otherwise get. If I want a judgment, I can look that up fairly easy today. But once again, that's how things are going to expand. And I get that. Does that make the initial outside requirement bad? I don't think so. The world's full of what's called slippery slopes, right? Slippery slopes is if you start here, there's no stopping it from, plummeting the whole way down. It's like being on a toboggan. You think you're going to stay at the top of the hill, but there's no traction. You're just going the whole way to the bottom. We live life on slippery slopes. So I'm not afraid of them. Part of life is trying to work together to have wisdom. I'm not sure the government has that all the time, but that's a problem with government, not necessarily with this outside requirement. So I think there are cases to be made for marketing enabling. What about market disabling? Market disabling. Remember, markets rely on trade. Trade relies on information. That's the whole thing I was talking about with the labels, right? You may have been nodding, right? Yeah, you need the information. What do you think prices are? Prices are information. Like them, dislike them, I don't care. It's information. Information how scarce something is or how scarce something people think will be, right? So gas prices isn't the price of the gas in the pump in front of you. Gas prices are the expected flow of gasoline to that pump over a certain period of time. That's the supply. And those prices, they signify what people's estimation of that supply from source coming out of the well to the pump is going to be. If they think that supply is going to go down, prices go up, you get it. Take microeconomics, okay? But that's real important information. And if you get wrong information, then you get people making collectively bad decisions. Those collectively bad decisions are called shortages. So if an outside regulation says, you're just pricing it too high, that's unfair, that's taking advantage of the customer, that's profiteering, whatever you want. People, and I'm going to get to this, people want like flashy terms for their things, right? And then you say, nope, that's the highest you can charge here. Well, you can say that, but I will challenge everybody. Okay. You go out and look. We're going to be coming up to hurricane season again sometime here, right? Hurricanes are going to be headed for the coast. All right. Take a look at the states that impose price controls on water. When that hurricane is projected, not the first one, because the first one has projections like, oh, might hit California. What? Once it hits that kind of band where people are like, oh, yeah, I got to prepare. I want you to look in that band and tell me if any store has water, because that's what a shortage is. If indeed every single case of every single store in those states with price controls on water has zero water, that's why. And it is. That's just a fact. I mean, you might have other arguments maybe about what you think fairness and stuff is, but I'm just telling you right now, manipulating our prices destroys markets. That is the number one disabling market regulation, is to mess with prices. Whether that be through taxes, because taxes can raise prices and that messes up the information stream, tariffs, or just outright price controls. Rent controls. Why am I going to build new property if there's a cap on what I can charge for it? And hence you have reduced supply and you have all the problems we have in cities now. You have other problems too with zoning and other building regulations, don't get me wrong, but yep, you mess with price, you slaughter the market. So that's going to be the number one thing. People want to believe it works. People want to think that somehow now everybody who can afford it can get it. We're going to put a price control so now the poor can get it. And the truth is that the affluent family with a large SUV just bought 30 cases of water. And the poor person who took the bus got there too late. That's a shortage. So price controls. I would also suggest speech regulations are market debilitate. First of all, I think price is an act of speech. I'd argue that. It's a form of communication. But advertising, information, that sort of thing, letting people know where you are, really market disabling. And I will admit, I'll stick to the argument, but I'm going to go to one of my pet peeves on this. Okay. I'm going to stick to the argument. Regulations determining the height of signs. Insane. The whole purpose of the sign is so you can find places. And the whole reason that they're 50 foot tall is because I'm traveling the speed limit on the interstate. So I'm going the speed limit plus. I need to be able to see. I can't be zipping by it. I need to see what's up ahead. Okay. People are like, why are you Googling while I'm driving? Is really regulators? This is what you want me to do? You want me to search Google Maps while I'm driving? Name me all the places to eat. I want to deliberate. No, the sign's up there so I can find the place. You put the sign down lower than the bushes, and there are places outside of Chicago and more places I'm seeing like this where that is the height of this. I can't find anything. You're destroying markets. You're destroying the consumer base of these businesses. And then probably crying why people are closing. Why isn't there a Wendy's? Because nobody could find it. And, add to that other regulations. But seriously, communications, being able to tell people what's there, being able to say what you offer. I think those are really market disabling. Licensing. Now people will say, well, hey, you just said safety and disclosure. Well, that's right. But you can disclose whether you have a license or not. You can make them optional, right? Certifications. You can, and let people decide, right? Whether they want, whether they agree with you that there's this huge risk. In the state of Illinois, my barber told me, we can go look this up, but my barber told me that to get a license, you have to go to barber school for 1,500 hours. Now, that's a practicum and your book work. But 1,500 hours, for comparison, 2,000 hours is a 40-hour work week, 50 weeks a year. All right. So 2,000 hours is a full-time job, 1,500 hours. Not to mention that when you go to barber school and you cut hair, to get your practice, you don't get a cut. The school gets all the money from the haircut. So in addition to your full-time job going to barber school, you have to have another full-time job to pay for it. I went to a small town not too far from here. And when I say small town, I mean about 7,000 people. So it's not a 200 person, 7,000. Not a single barber. Not one. And in fact, it's happening more and more. Why? Because these licensing regulations, they're killing the market for barbers. They're killing it by killing the supply. Absolutely. right? You kill the labor market, you kill the services and supplies anytime that you restrict entry into a field. Now you might say, well, wait a second, because people always like to take things too far immediately. And what about pilots? What about doctors? Okay, I'll leave them alone in this discussion. All right. There are scores of other licenses: interior decorating, flower arranging. Oh my God, you put the baby's breath in the wrong place. Seriously? That's it's self-serving licensing regulations from those who already have a license to jack up the price of their services by avoiding competition. Just flat out. Okay. So licensing, definite, big time, market disabling, right? And also human disabling too. You spend all that time getting a barber's license in Illinois, and there's no guarantee that that same license would be respected, say, in California, and you'd have to do it again. What if your family moves to California? What if you just want to move out of Illinois? I know who would want to move out of Illinois, but right, you're stuck, right? So it really, really plays with the labor market in ways that you can't always see directly. A couple of other things I want to mention here as well. Market disabling, strict liability. That is, you're liable for harm caused, say, by your product or harm caused even by your event, no matter whether you intended it or not, or no matter whether you were negligent or not. It's led to a far more boring world because there are things in this world that are fun: playgrounds, church bazaars, right? Those kind of things. They're just too expensive to run because more and more it looks like a strict liability standard. Anybody gets hurt on the property while they're doing that, they can sue the church or whoever's running the playground. Why would you even subject yourself to that anymore? And that's exactly what we find. People don't. Flat out don't. We don't notice because they're not there anymore. So strict liability standards really market disabling. Might there be one or two cases where that standard is necessary? We could talk about that, but it would still be one or two, not what we see today. We are way over the line. Couple final considerations as we're talking about regulation. Okay. In some of the cases, what people are worried about and want to make sure of, like safety, could be done privately, like Underwriters Laboratory, making sure that your electronics products are safe, or consumer reports. One of the dangers of having a government agency in charge of regulatory endeavors is that whoever is working for that agency, their interest is to follow the rules. Because if they don't follow the rules, they'll get in trouble. And okay, we need rules. I want employees in the government to have rules. But do you understand, like, the impact of that? There's no room for saying, "Oh, I understand. Okay, we in this case maybe we, no, zip. This is the rule. This is whether the rule's dumb, whether the rule's smart, whether the rule's 50 years old, right? Uh, you know, I don't see that I don't know, something outdated. It doesn't matter. It's still there. Oops, it's still there. You have to comply with it. And that person, that's their interest. Whereas if the possibility arises for a more voluntary, market-based, whatever type of regulation, then to work with customers and suppliers to find sensible standards, the incentive is there more so. And I was thinking about restaurants, right? I I have no idea what restaurant regulations are for cleanliness, okay? But does that need to be the same for every restaurant? Are there standards set for the consumer? Are they, you know? And I don't know. And it's worth looking into. But the reason I bring it up is it's hard to have that conversation because of the way they name regulations. Everything's puppies and kittens. Who's against puppies and kittens? So right away, if I start talking about, maybe these health and safety regs are, out of line or off base, they're like, you're against health and safety. I'm not against health and safety. right? It's the implementation of it. Is there different ways to do it? Is this even necessary? Is this And what's hilarious to me is, and I've had this discussion with my students, everybody's like, health and safety, health and safety. Then I ask how many people traveled. A lot of people have. And there are a lot of countries you can travel to, don't have the health and safety regulations on food vendors that we do. And people happily eat the food and say how yummy it is to eat local. Seriously. You know what you just did? You ate at an unregulated or a far less regulated eating establishment. Right? Was that unhealthy? Was that unsafe? Maybe. But if you're lining up for a place where there's 50 people already eating and they always eat there, it's probably a good bet, right? There are other ways to judge these things. But the names, I can't even have the discussion because if I open my mouth up, I'm against health. So let me just put it this way. You know, there are places in the world that serve food without our regulations, and it looks like people do fine. So maybe we could reconsider because it's not about health. It's about whether the regulations make sense in place, whatever they might be, whether that's worker safety or restaurant health. And on the issue of worker safety, even if we take like I was talking about bailments earlier, nobody goes to work to die. So negligence standards should apply for torts. Absolutely. But is every single labor, safety regulation come out of OSHA actually for safety? Or is it window dressing? Was it just something more for the agency to put up that this is what we've done? And then the poor inspector who comes in ends up, they have to enforce, right, these regulations, whether they make sense or not. Their job is just to follow the rules. And that's what they do. And so, like I said, we want to open up a discussion on this. Let's take a look at what might be market enabling regulations, what might be market disabling regulations. And in the course of our conversation, let's keep in mind that the name of a regulation or the name of the area shouldn't deter us from actually looking at the implementation. If what we're really after is health or safety, then let's look at health and safety and not confuse those with the regulation that's being imposed, because that's the question that we're trying to figure out, because what we want to do is have a thriving, beneficial market, because that's what allows individuals to flourish and do better in the world. That's what capitalism is. And that's what the Academy on Capitalism likes to discuss. Thank you very much for joining us today. Once again, please hit the like button, maybe even subscribe. Ooh, you can see our other videos as they come out. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.